आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं मैं, आपका दोस्त और होस्ट सुनील शर्मा। बड़ी खूबसूरत लाइन के साथ में आज एक खास पेशकश है। बजट, यूनियन बजट आया है हमारे देश का। तो यूनियन बजट में क्या है और हर एक आम और खास के लिए वो बताने के लिए हमारे साथ एक खास मेहमान और खास इन तमाम मामलों के जानकार अनिल हरीश साहब, ये अनिल एडवोकेट अनिल हरीश साहब जुड़े हुए। उनका मैं स्वागत करता हूं तमाम। और साथ ही जो लाइव जुड़े हुए हैं हमारे साथ यूट्यूब पे और फेसबुक पर, उन सभी का जो पार्टिसिपेट जुड़े उनका स्वागत करता हूं बड़ी खूबसूरत लाइन के साथ में कि ना कोई राह आसान चाहिए, ना कोई राह आसान चाहिए, ना ही हमें कोई पहचान चाहिए। ना कोई राह आसान चाहिए, ना ही हमें कोई पहचान चाहिए। एक ही चीज मांगते हैं रोज भगवान से, एक ही चीज मांगते हैं रोज भगवान से। अपनों के चेहरे पर, आप सभी के चेहरे पर हर पल प्यारी सी मुस्कान चाहिए, हर पल प्यारी सी मुस्कान चाहिए। इस मुस्कान भरी लाइन के साथ में सभी आप तमाम जो ऑडियंस हमारे देख रहे हैं और पार्टिसिपेट है, और अनिल हरीश साहब का मैं स्वागत करता हूं। किसकी तरफ से दोस्तों? महासेवा, महाराष्ट्र सोसाइटी वेलफेयर एसोसिएशन, जिसके कर्तव्यता हाउसिंग गुरु रमेश प्रभु जी हैं, और फेडरेशन एकोमोडेशन इंडस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया और ऑल इंडिया बिजनेस काउंसिल्स और एमएनएस मीडिया न्यूज सर्विस की तरफ से आप तमाम लोगों का, आप जो लोग देख रहे हैं यूनियन बजट पर क्या होगी आम और खास की क्या रिक्वायरमेंट्स है, किस तरह से हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी और निर्मला सीतारमन जी ने क्या पेश किया है, ये तमाम विषय को बताने के लिए हमारे खास आज के जो स्पीकर्स हैं एडवोकेट अनिल हरीश साहब और श्री सीए आरवी शाह साहब, और हमारे गेस्ट ऑफ ऑनर है, बता दूं आपको, श्री सीए रमेश प्रभु जी हैं, और डॉक्टर आर के मेकर हैं, श्री केवी सत्यमूर्ति साहब हैं, और श्री शरण खन्ना जी हैं। और खास इस पूरे वेबिनार को डिजाइन किया है हमारे मॉडरेटर आज के हरिराम चौधरी जी। उनकी स्पिरिट देखने लायक है कि वो इतनी उम्र में भी 75 के ऊपर, उसके बाद भी आज भी कार्यरत है। तो उनका भी मैं स्वागत करता हूं, वेलकम करता हूं। मैं सबसे पहले आप सभी को बता दूं दोस्तों कुछ, जैसे ही फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर निर्मला सीतारमन जी ने 1 फरवरी को वतन बजट में जो पेश किया है, वो तमाम बारीकियां और तमाम आप सब लोगों के लिए क्या है, बिजनेस इंडस्ट्री के लिए, हाउसिंग सोसाइटी, तमाम लोगों के लिए क्या है, वो बताने के लिए हमारे साथ अनिल हरीश जी जुड़े हुए। लेकिन मोटा मोटा बजट में वेतन भोगी जो है, वेतन भोगी जो सैलरी पर्सन है, उनमें कोई राहत नहीं दी गई है, बल्कि भविष्य निधि जो होती है दोस्तों, प्रोविडेंट फंड पीएफ में सालाना करीबन 2.5 लाख रुपए से ज्यादा की रकम जमा करने पर मिलने वाला जो उस पर ब्याज है, पीएफ पे जो ब्याज मिलता है उस वो टैक्सेबल होगी। इस तरह की चीज आई है, एक नई चीज है। और दूसरी, एक और साथ ही इसके साथ एक राहत दी है, करदाताओं को अब एडवांस टैक्स यानी कि टीडीएस के भुगतान के वक्त लाभांश से होने वाली आय, मतलब डिविडेंड इनकम का हिसाब नहीं करना होगा। टीडीएस तभी कटेगा जब डिविडेंड की घोषणा हो जाएगी या कंपनी डिविडेंड देगी। कंपनी यदि डिविडेंड देगी तभी टीडीएस कटेगा। इससे टैक्स पेयर को ब्याज पर टैक्स देने से छुटकारा मिलेगा। तो ये एक छोटी छोटी मोटी चीज है आप तमाम लोगों के लिए दोस्तों। अब मैं इनवाइट करूंगा हमारे प्रभु सर को, और उसके बाद आप सीए जो रमेश प्रभु साहब है, महाराष्ट्र सोसाइटी वेलफेयर एसोसिएशन, पिछले कोरोना काल में पिछले 9-10 महीने से हम लगातार, फरवरी 1 हो जाएगा हमें, और ये हम लगातार वेबिनार कर रहे हैं। अब वीकली कर रहे हैं, लेकिन पहले डेली करते थे, अब वर्किंग शुरू हो गया, क्योंकि अर्थव्यवस्था को संभालना है, और अर्थव्यवस्था को संभालने के लिए लोगों को अवेयर करने के लिए, एजुकेट करने के लिए ये प्लेटफॉर्म है, फ्री ऑफ चार्ज, कोई चार्ज नहीं है इस पे। तो मैं प्रभु साहब, ऐसे जो प्रभु साहब और एमएनएस मीडिया न्यूज सर्विस ने मिलकर ये 1 साल करीबन हो जाएगा, हमारा ये फरवरी चल रहा है, 25 फरवरी लास्ट वीक में पूरा 1 साल पूरा होने जा रहा है। तो मैं प्रभु साहब को इनवाइट करूंगा कि आज जो हमारा बजट का स्पेशल वेबिनार है, 21 और 22 तक क्या फर्क पड़ेगा, ऐसे हमारे हाउसिंग गुरु रमेश प्रभु जी को इनवाइट करूंगा। तमाम लोगों का वेलकम करें, स्वागत करें।
मैं उनको स्वागत करता हूं। और सुनील शर्मा जी, आप आगे का अल्टीमेटली हमें एक्सपर्ट्स को सुनना है। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
बिल्कुल, थैंक यू प्रभु सर। जरूर एक्सपर्ट को हम सुनेंगे, लेकिन ये जो कार्यक्रम ऑर्गेनाइज किया है उसके लिए भी हमारे जो है आरवी साहब, सीए आरवी साहब, उनको इनवाइट करूंगा। और उसके बाद मैं आगे की बागडोर के लिए हरिराम चौधरी जी को सुपुर्द करूंगा। तो आरवी साहब अवेलेबल है मीटिंग में, तो प्लीज आए और स्वागत करें सभी लोगों का।
तो महासेवा की तरफ से और फेडरेशन ऑफ अकोमोडेशन इंडस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया की तरफ से और ऑल इंडिया बिजनेस काउंसिल की तरफ से और मैं आप सब लोगों का स्वागत करता हूँ। और आरवी साहब भी हमको ज्वाइन कर चुके हैं। मेरे बाद में आरवी साहब बोलेंगे, उसके बाद में अनिल हरीश जी बोलेंगे। तो अभी ये तीनों संस्थाएं मिलकर आज तीनों संस्थाएं मिलकर ये प्रोग्राम कर रही है। इसके पहले भी हम लोग ज्वाइंटली कर चुके हैं और आगे भी हम ज्वाइंटली करते रहेंगे। हम रमेश प्रभु जी को धन्यवाद देते हैं। आरवी साहब अभी हमारे सबसे अभी स्वागत भाषण करेंगे, तो वो भी अभी करेंगे।
I accord very warm welcome to Dr. R.M. Maker to be who has kindly given his consent to accept our invitation to be the chief guest of honor for today's budget meeting. I, on behalf of all, profoundly thank Advocate Anil Harish, who has readily agreed to speak on the Union Budget 21-22. I also welcome Mr. K.V. Satyamurthy, Honorary Emeritus Founder President of Federation of Accommodation Industry of India. I also welcome Ramesh Prabhu, the Honorary Chairman of Mahaseva, the Dharamdas Mehta, Honorary Chairman of All India Business Council, Mr. Saran Khanna, Honorary Vice President of Federation of Accommodation Industry, Mr. Jubin Lakdawala, Honorary General Secretary of Federation, Hariram Chaudhary, General Secretary, and Mr. Mehul Koteja, Honorary Treasurer. I now give the introduction of Honorable Learned Speaker and Eminent Advocate, Mr. Anil Harish. Mr. Anil Harish is a senior partner of law firm D.M. Harish and Company, founded by his late father, D.M. Harish. He has passed his LLB from University of Mumbai and also had his master in the LLM from Miami University of USA. His practice includes diverse areas of law, including property, exchange control, foreign investment, trust, wills, and Indian and international taxation. He is on the managing committee of Indian Merchant Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Tax Consultants, and ITAT Bar Association, and office bearer of several leading institutions such as Indian Law Firm, of which he is a vice president. His client includes both resident and non-resident individuals, as well as domestic and international organizations. He has authored several articles which have been published in Times of India, Hindustan Times, and various esteemed professional journals. He is a director of several organizations and prestigious public limited companies. He is also he is involved in the several educational and charitable trusts and has also been the president of Hyderabad Sindh National Collegiate Board. Now it has its educational institution with 45,000 students. He has also given several speeches at events such as Indian Calling Summit in Brussels, Belgium in 2009, organized by Indian Merchant Chamber of Commerce. He has also addressed audience in London, Dubai, Doha, Muscat, Jakarta on several occasions on topics such as FEMA, taxation, collaborations, etc. He is a regular speaker on budget in the Federation of Accommodation Industry of India for last several years. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to speak on this budget.
थैंक यू आरवी साहब थैंक यू वेरी मच। अभी मैं दोस्तों हमारे अनिल हरीश साहब का बड़ी ऐसे अच्छे लोगों की तारीफ नहीं करे दोस्तों शेरो शायरी से, तो मुझे कहीं ना कमतर पड़े हम, तो कमतर ना पड़े। वार्म वेलकम करता हूं बड़ी खूबसूरत लाइन के साथ में अनिल हरीश साहब का कि तारीफों के मोहताज नहीं होते अच्छे लोग, तारीफों के मोहताज नहीं होते अच्छे लोग, क्योंकि फूलों पर इत्र नहीं लगाया जाता, क्योंकि फूलों पर इत्र नहीं लगाया जाता। और ये हमारे साथ ऐसा आईटी इंडस्ट्री और तमाम ऐसे जो इनकम टैक्स के मामलों के जानकार हैं अनिल हरीश साहब, ऐसे फूल हैं हमारे भारत के और हमारे मुंबई शहर के कि वो हमेशा ऐसे अवेयरनेस के जो प्लेटफॉर्म होते हैं फ्री इंफॉर्मेशन देने के, वो तुरंत हाजिर हो जाते हैं। तो ऐसे अनिल जी का मैं स्वागत करता हूं और आगे की बागडोर के लिए हरिराम चौधरी जी को मैं सुपुर्द करता हूं। और आप तमाम सब लोगों के सवाल जवाब भी लेंगे, चैट बॉक्स में सवाल जवाब अपने नाम के साथ में टाइप करें।
अभी हम आगे बढ़े उसके पहले मैं सत्यमूर्ति जी का स्वागत करना चाहूंगा। श्री केवी सत्यमूर्ति हमारे फेडरेशन ऑफ अकोमोडेशन इंडस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया के आज हमारे बीच में है। फेडरेशन ऑफ अकोमोडेशन ऑफ इंडस्ट्री भी हमारे साथ में आज जॉइंटली कर रही है, तो मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ। सत्यमूर्ति जी हमारे आए हैं। सत्यमूर्ति जी के बारे में एक बात बताना चाहता हूँ कि अमिताभ बच्चन जी के नेक्स्ट डोर नेबर है। उनका बंगला एक कॉमन दीवार है। तो ये बात है।
Only brought half a smile. Why? Because the half smile is on account of the things that have not been done. Everyone was expecting a COVID tax because there have been so much difficulty. They thought that wealth tax would be introduced, or there'd be a higher income tax, or extra surcharges on account of COVID, or an inheritance tax. Luckily, that has not happened. And so therefore, we have half a smile on our face. What has been done in the Income Tax Act is not significant from the point of view of real estate industry. It has not given many benefits. There has been so much problem for many industries, for travel and tourism, for real estate, for manufacturing. It's only a few industries, such as the pharmaceutical industry, which have done well in this 1 year. We thought that there would be much more in the budget. And while there is talk about infrastructure, that so much is going to be spent on roads in the next few years, there has not been anything directly to benefit each individual in the Income Tax Act. There are some procedural changes, and there are a lot of changes that have been suggested. In fact, this year, the finance bill contains as many as 78 clauses relating to income tax. Some of them are retrospective in the same way as they have been in the past. So we do not have clarity on these things. Any change in the law should be prospective and should not affect people in relation to past years. As always, the stated objectives are that some incentives are being given. Some difficulties are being faced by taxpayers, and these are to be removed. And then there's what they call a rationalization of various provisions. But the amendments that are sometimes introduced are so complicated that these will have to be re-rationalized in the next budget and the budget after that. We see changes like that all the time. So there are as many as 78 clauses in the finance bill which relate to the Income Tax Act. There are a few which relate to housing and real estate. That section 80EEA gives a deduction of 1,50,000 rupees on interest taken for a loan for a residential house. Up to now, the position was that the loan should have been sanctioned between 1st April 2019 and 31st March 2021. And the stamp duty value of the house should not exceed 45 lakhs. So it affected very few people, only who were buying in the affordable housing segment, not taking into account the fact that in a place like Mumbai, to get a house of up to 45 lakhs is next to impossible. Other conditions were that the assessee should not own any residential house property on the date of sanction. Now, this last date for sanction of the loan has been extended from 31st March 21 to 31st March 22. So one may continue to get a loan even over the next year and then get a deduction for the interest. But it is not as if the housing shortage will get over in 1 year. Planning at least at a high level, such as at the union government level, should be for much longer than that. It's not that there will be no loans needed thereafter, but in fact, there will be more and more, costs will be more, and the exemption for interest should be higher. It should have been increased from 1,50,000, and there should be no time limit at all until such time as there is no further need for housing, which of course we cannot foresee for many, many years. Then section 80 IBA is another provision which affects housing. Up to now, the position was that there would be 100% exemption from the profits of an affordable housing project, subject to conditions. And one of the conditions was that the approval for the project should be granted between 2016 and 31/3/2021. This year was a lockdown, so it was quite a washout. This date has been extended to 31/3/2022. So that means an assessee who is carrying on an affordable housing project will be able to get plans sanctioned by 31/3/2022. It may take 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or so to complete the project, but the plans have to be sanctioned now by 31st March 22, and then one will get 100% tax exemption. There will be a similar extension for an affordable rental housing project. So this is a good thing because it does extend the period, and this will be of benefit even over the next few years, even though the extension is only for 1 year. But again, I feel that this could have been kept open-ended until such time it is felt that the housing shortage is completely over. But nevertheless, we have to count our blessings as they fall. If a developer sells a residential house where the consideration does not exceed 2 crores of rupees, then there will be a bigger safe harbor. Now, what is a safe harbor? Under Section 43CA of the Income Tax Act, suppose the reckoner value of a flat is, let's say, 1 crore of rupees, and the assessee and the builder sells the property for about 95 lakhs or so. Then, in the past, he would have had to pay tax as if he was getting 100 lakhs, 1 crore of rupees, even though he was not actually getting it. He was getting less than the reckoner value. Then they said that we will give some margin, which they call a safe harbor. First, they gave a margin of 5%. Then they gave a margin of 10%. Now they've said that the margin in the case of a developer can be 20%. So he can sell at within 20% of the reckoner value. He will not be taxed on the reckoner value, but only on the actual consideration that he receives, provided that the consideration does not exceed 2 crores of rupees, and if the transfer takes place during the period from 12th November 2020 to 30th June 2021. So let's take an example. If a builder sells a flat for 2 crores of rupees and the reckoner value is, say, 2 crores and 20 lakhs, then that is the 10% margin. Now they are increasing it to 20%. So if the reckoner value is 2 crores and 40 lakhs and he still sells it for 2 crores of rupees, he will not have to pay tax on that additional 40 lakhs of rupees, being the shortfall between the reckoner and his transaction price. He will have to pay tax only with reference to 2 crores of rupees, which is his consideration amount. So this is a good benefit. It does help builders in areas where the reckoner value is much more than the selling price in that area. But yesterday I was giving a speech in Navi Mumbai, and I asked several of the builders there what they thought about this and whether this provision will. They said no, it doesn't help them much, because in Navi Mumbai, fortunately for them, the reckoner values are lower and the transaction prices are higher. In Mumbai, however, we do find in some areas that the reckoner values are very high, and this would help in those areas. And of course, it will be different in different parts of the country. But one or two things that we need to note are that this is only from 12th November 2020 up to 30th June 2021. Now, the period from 12th November 2020 up to January and early February is already over. So in effect, it will actually help people only for the remaining few months. I don't know why they've done this in a retrospective way. The second condition is that the sale should be directly by the developer, and this does not apply to second sales. So if a developer sells a flat for a consideration of up to 2 crores, then he will get the benefit of the safe harbor. But if his purchaser then does a second sale, again below the reckoner, he will not get the benefit of this 20% safe harbor. He will only have the benefit of 10% under Section 50CA under Section 50C of the Income Tax Act. And the purchaser will get this benefit under Section 56(2)(10). So this is useful, and it will help in some cases. A new provision, which also one has to be careful of and one has to bear in mind. This says that suppose you are making payment to someone, and that person, and you are required to deduct tax at source to do a TDS, and if that person has not filed returns for the last 2 years, or in some cases for 3 years, then you have to find out whether the person has filed returns or not. If he has not filed returns, then you must deduct tax not at the regular rate, but at a higher rate, which can be twice the rate in the relevant provision, or twice the rate in force, or 5%. So let's take an example relating to housing. Under Section 194IA of the Income Tax Act, if you buy a property for more than 50 lakhs of rupees, then you know that you have to do a TDS, which used to be at the rate of 1%. This year, because of the lockdown, they reduced the rate to 0.75%. So suppose you're buying a flat for, say, 1 crore of rupees. Your TDS has to be 75,000 rupees. Now, suppose the person who's selling the property to you has not filed returns for the last 2 years. It could be that he's a person who doesn't have taxable income and he's now selling the property because he needs the money, and now in future he will have income. But if he has not filed his income tax return for the last 2 years, then you will have to deduct tax at source not only at 0.75%, but you will have to deduct at 5%, because you have to deduct at the highest of the following: twice the rate in the relevant provision, or twice the rate in force, or 5%. The highest of these in this case would be 5%, because 0.75 into 2 is 1.5%. So now you would have to do a TDS at 5%. So when you are doing a transaction, such as for purchase of a property, please note that you must find out whether the other person is filing has filed tax returns or not, and if not, you will have to deduct tax at a higher rate. This is another provision which can affect real estate, and this is on account of TDS on purchase of goods. At present, there are many provisions in the Income Tax Act which relate to TDS on contracts and on services primarily, and on dividends and interest and salaries. So if, for example, a developer appoints a contractor, he has to deduct TDS under Section 194C. If he appoints an architect and an engineer, as he has to, then he would have to do TDS on the professional services under Section 194J. But when he's buying goods, when he's buying steel, when he's buying cement, he'll pay by check, no doubt, but he doesn't have to do a TDS. Now the law is going to be that if a payer, any payer, not only a developer, but any payer has a turnover of more than 10 crores in the preceding financial year and buys goods of more than 50 lakhs from one particular vendor during the year, then he will have to do a TDS. The amount is not very large. The amount is 0.1%, but still it has to be borne in mind. And the section is clear enough to say that you do not have to do TDS on the first 50 lakhs, because in the beginning of the year, you do not know how much your purchases are going to be. Are they going to cross 50 or they are not going to cross 50? So suppose, for instance, it happens that a developer is buying steel. On the first 50 lakhs, there will be no TDS. Then if he buys steel for, say, another 10 lakhs, then he will have to do TDS of 0.1% on that 10 lakhs, not on the first 50 lakhs, but on the 10 lakhs. If he buys a further amount, then again, there'll be a TDS. So this applies to any assessee who has a turnover of more than 10 crores in the preceding year and who buys goods for more than 50 lakhs of rupees. The TDS will be 0.1% on the excess over rupees 50 lakhs paid during that financial year. There is already an important provision in the Income Tax Act which everyone should be aware of, and that is Section 45(4). Section 45(4) says that in the event of a dissolution of a firm or an LLP or an association of persons or a body of individuals, in the event of a dissolution or a reconstitution, there can be a tax at the time of dissolution. So let's take the case of a firm which has 4 partners, A, B, C, D, and let's say the firm has properties. It has property number 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the partners have been holding, the firm has been holding the properties, and now the partners decide to dissolve the firm. So they dissolve it and all the flats are equal, for example. They all take 1 flat. So they think, yes, we are fine. We took what was due to us. But under the existing Section 45(4), the law is that the firm will have to calculate the market value of those 4 flats, deduct from that the cost, and on that difference of capital gain, and the cost will be indexed also on that difference, which that will be treated as a capital gain, and the firm will have to pay tax on that. This is provided capital assets are being given to the retiring partners or the partners upon the dissolution. So Section 45(4) is already there since about 1988. Now they're amending this and they're substituting Section 45(4) and also putting in a new subsection 4A. So it'll be 45(4) and 45(4)A, which have to be considered. Sometimes it has happened that assessees, in order to avoid tax, revalued the asset in the books of the firm. So on the asset side, they would have the value of the the cost of the asset, and on the liability side will be the capital account. Sometimes they've revalued the asset to bring it to market value, and they've given a corresponding credit in their capital accounts. On that basis, they used to contend, and some tribunal decisions, etc., have held that there was no tax because they had already got a substantial credit balance. But now, Section 45.4 and 45.4a are to be inserted to say several things. One, the tax will be on the firm in the event an asset is handed over. Two, any revaluation will be ignored. And three, the tax will be when not only a capital asset is given to the retiring partners or the partners of the erstwhile partners of the dissolved firm, but even if money is given which is more than their credit balance, or even if stock in trade is given. So this is now brought under the chapter of capital gains, even though stock in trade may be given. The provisions are quite complex. You have to go through them very carefully, see how they apply to you in the event you're doing a dissolution or even a retirement of a partner from a firm, or a reconstitution when the partner gets any assets, capital assets or stock in trade, or gets money in lieu of his interest in the firm. There have been changes to the provisions for tax audit. In the last couple of years, the limit for tax audit was raised from 1 crore to 5 crores of rupees in the case of a business. But the condition of that 5 crores turnover, of the increase in 5 crores turnover being applicable, was that the receipts in cash should be only up to 5% and payments in cash should only be up to 5% of all the payments. So if, for instance, a business had a turnover of 4 crores and 10% and 5% of 4 crores was 20 lakhs of rupees, but if the cash receipts were 25 lakhs, it would still have to do a tax audit. But if the cash payments were less than 5% of that 4 crores and the receipts in cash were less than 5%, then that limit was raised from 1 crore to 5 crores. Now, Section 44AB is being amended to provide that the increase in limit for tax audit will be 10 crores, provided these 5% conditions are followed in terms of payments and in terms of receipts. If, however, you exceed 5% in cash, either on receipts or on payment, then the threshold is only 1 crore rupees. So even if you've got a business of a turnover of 1 crore 10 lakhs or so, you will have to do a tax audit. So you have to be very careful about this, but it can help you. Sunilji mentioned the advance tax on dividend income. Section 234C of the Income Tax Act provides that interest will be payable on shortfall of advance tax. At the beginning of the year, we generally don't know how much income we are going to have. And this year was truly an exceptional year because in the month of June, people had not even started their offices. They couldn't even go to their offices. And therefore, they did not know how long the lockdown would continue. It was totally unpredictable. And therefore, many people did not pay advance tax. Now, the economy has started functioning again. One would have to pay advance tax, but because there was a shortfall in the month of June, you would have to pay interest under 234C. The impact of this shortfall is now being reduced to some extent by this amendment. This says that if dividend income is received during the year, then you will not have to predict that dividend income. You will not have to pay advance tax, say, on 15 June or 15 September, but your liability to pay advance tax will arise only after the dividend is declared. So, if a company had declared dividend, let's say in the month of October, because they had the AGM in September, and let's say they declared dividend to you on the 10th of October. Now, the June installment was already over. The September installment of advance tax was already over. You could not take that dividend into account for those first two installments because you did not know how much you were going to get. Now that you've got the dividend, let's say in October, then you must pay the advance tax after taking into account your TDS. You must pay the advance tax by 15th December and by 15th March. So you will not have to pay interest on the shortfall in advance tax for the first couple of installments in this example because you were not aware of how much dividend would come, or you could not predict how much dividend would come. There is one exception to this, and that relates to deemed dividend. Now, deemed dividend is something that everyone who has a company should be conscious of. Under Section 222E, of the Income Tax Act if there is a company which has reserves. And if the company gives a loan to a shareholder who has more than 10% interest in the company, even if that shareholder returns the money in one day, he just takes a loan for one day and returns it, that entire amount will be treated as a dividend and will be taxed in his hands. So let's say you are a shareholder of a company and you need 50 lakhs of rupees because you have to pay your tax and you'll return it in a day or two. You take the money out, you give it back, you may even pay interest on that amount for 2 days. But still, because the company had reserves and you are a substantial shareholder, you will have to pay tax on that amount as if it is a dividend. It's called a deemed dividend under Section 222E. So this is a very dangerous provision. Many people have been affected by this. That's why I'm explaining it in detail. New provision for advance tax on dividend income, which is to apply only after the dividend is declared, will not apply to deemed dividend. So even if you take a loan from your company and it becomes a deemed dividend on 20th March, your liability to pay advance tax still arose on 15 June, 15 September, 15 December, 15 March, and you would have to pay interest on the shortfall, even though the deemed dividend was much later. There are several changes being made to the due date for filing of a return, a belated return, a revised return, and a defective return. What change is this? Let's suppose the person is a partner of a firm. Now, normally he would have to file his return by the 31st of July. But since he's a partner of a firm and the firm has a tax audit and gets a due date of 30th September, then the partner also now has his facility to file on the same date as the firm. He cannot file beforehand because he doesn't even know how much the income or his figures will be. He doesn't have the balance sheet or the P&L account of the firm. So he gets an extension up to the due date. In the same way, if a person is a partner of a firm which does a transfer pricing audit, then the last date for filing of the return is 30th November, and so the individual also will get that time. In the same way, a couple in Goa who are governed by the Portuguese Civil Code will also get a similar extension for both the persons, the husband and the wife. Belated returns or revised returns up to now had to be filed before the end of the assessment year. But now they're reducing that time, and a revised return can only be filed by 31st December or before the completion of the assessment, whichever is earlier. So this gives a very short time. So you can't afford to make mistakes. You may file your regular return by 31st July. If you want to file a revised return, do it by 31st December. Or if you do a transfer pricing audit, you have to file your return by 30th November. In such a case, you get an extension of only 1 month in order to be able to file a revised return. So that's not much time, and therefore you have to be extremely careful. They also say now that in the case of defective returns, the Central Board of Direct Taxes may relax the conditions in genuine cases. All the conditions have not been set out. They will be relaxed by the board from time to time. Now, reopening of cases is done, of course, in the case of search and seizure, and this has to be read with the next slide. Here, they say that in the case of a normal reopening, the time within which the ITO can reopen will only be 3 years from the end of the assessment year under Section 149. But if it's a search and seizure case, then the 3-year period will not apply. It'll be the normal 6 years or 10 years. And in the event the income escaped is more than 50 lakhs of rupees, or the asset that has not been assessed is more than 50 lakhs, then the time period within which such a notice can be issued and a reassessment carried out is 10 years. So the 3-year period only applies to cases where the income is less than 50 lakhs and does not apply for higher amounts than that, and does not apply to a search or seizure or a requisition under the Income Tax Act. Another change, which is also beneficial, is that the time for completing assessments will now be 9 months from the end of the assessment year, from assessment year 2021-22 onwards. So when you file your return soon, in April, May, June, etc., then the assessment will have to be completed by 31st December 22 and not by 31st March 23, as was the position up to now. So they will get a very short time within which to complete the assessments. As they are reducing the time for assessees, so the time for the department is also being reduced. There are a certain kind of investments known as ULIP, Unit Linked Insurance Plan. Up to now, the position has been that if, for instance, you invest in units or you make an investment in LIC or in PPF, etc., then your limit under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act is 1,50,000 rupees. But what people used to do was that they would buy ULIPs, unit-linked insurance policies, and let's say they paid a premium of 10 lakhs of rupees in a year. The deduction that they got under Section 80C was still only 1,50,000. But when they paid that 10 lakhs, let's say for a period of 10 years, that means the total contribution was 1 crore of rupees. And then when they got back the amount, let's say they would get 1 crore and 50 lakhs of rupees on the maturity of the policy. That entire 50 lakhs, being the surplus, was exempt under Section 1010D. It seeks to amend the Income Tax Act to say that you cannot pay such high amounts. And even if you do, you will not get a tax exemption on the maturity value. The exemption on the maturity value will be only to the extent that your premium is up to 2,50,000. Anything in excess of that will not be subject to the exemption on the maturity value. This is different from Section 80C. The position under Section 80C of 1,50,000 still continues. This is under Section 1010D. They've also clarified, or they will also amend the law, Section 214, to state that if, for instance, you have acquired ULIPs by payment of premium, and now you want to sell those ULIPs before the redemption date or before the maturity date, then whatever gain you make can be liable for tax under Section, because it will be treated as a capital asset under Section 214, and therefore the provisions of Section 45 onwards will apply. Section 142(1) says that only the assessing officer can issue a notice. Now they are going to amend it to say that even certain other tax authorities, senior authorities, can issue a notice to compel you to file a return. You have seen that in the last couple of years there have been faceless assessments, that you are not called by the ITO to go and appear before him. They send you a notice. They have to write out the objections or the queries clearly. You give a reply. The notice may come to you from any part of the country, from Kashmir or from Kanyakumari, from Assam or from Gujarat. It can come from anywhere, no matter that you are located in Mumbai. And these faceless proceedings have been going on. I think it's worked quite well because the officers have to set out their objections or their queries very clearly, and you have time to give replies in a proper manner, and there isn't that much contact, etc. It's faceless. So I think it's worked quite well. In some cases, of course, you need to be able to explain personally, which one doesn't get the opportunity to do, but on the whole, it's fine. Even for appeals before the CIT appeals, the position is that there can be faceless appeals, but now they're going to extend it to the tribunal. In the last few months, the hearings before the tribunal have been virtual hearings. That means you're on video, like we are doing our discussion today on video. But at least it was a hearing that if the tribunal member had a question, you could put it forward, he could put it forward to you and you will explain it. Or you set out all the facts and circumstances, or you make an argument. And there is an interactive process. But now, even before the tribunal, it's going to be over a period of time, over the next 2 years, by 31/3/2023, they want to make these faceless. They say that they want to eliminate the interface between the tribunal and the assessee. They want to optimize utilization of the resources, and they want to introduce an appellate system with dynamic jurisdiction. That means jurisdiction will not only be that the tribunal sitting in Mumbai will hear cases of Mumbai, Pune tribunal will hear Pune cases, etc. But anyone from any part of the country may hear it. Well, it does eliminate an interface. It can remove a little bit of subjectivity, but I think that hearings are very necessary. They're this is part of the principles of natural justice, where you have a right to a hearing, and many things can be explained personally much better than in writing. If it was only in writing that everything had to be done, then we would not be having this talk right now. I would have just emailed to you a whole commentary on the provisions of the Income Tax Act, and we would not have been able to explain or come to the point. In fact, by having hearings like this, there can be economies in terms of time, because you can concentrate on the substance rather than just filling up pages and pages of material. But this is what is going to happen, and we do not know whether it's going to go up even to the High Court and Supreme Court in future. Let's hope that even when there is a raid, however, it's not a faceless raid. We should know who the people are who are coming for the raid. We do not want it to happen as it happened in the case of Tribhuvandas Bhimji Zaveri many years ago, that some persons came in, they pretended to be income tax officers, and they took away a lot of gold and jewelry from there on the basis that they were officers. In fact, they were not. They were crooks, and they were never caught. So now people may come just wearing masks or say that we cannot show you our faces, but we are income tax officers. So let's hope that this kind of thing doesn't happen. Up to now, there has been the Income Tax Settlement Commission. They're now going to remove this with effect from the 1st of February. So the moment the budget was announced, the Settlement Commission came to an end. For pending matters, there will be what is called an interim board of settlement, which will continue these matters and decide them over the next few months. But now there will be no more Settlement Commission. There has been a lot of talk in the newspapers and on TV, and even the finance minister talked about senior citizens not having to file income tax returns in certain cases. But these cases are very few. Firstly, the person must be 75 years or more during the financial year. Secondly, the person should have only pension income and some interest income. But if the person has even 1 rupee of capital gain, he will still be liable to file a return. And the interest income must only be from the same bank in which he is received, in which he is depositing his pension. Now, suppose they specify State Bank of India as one of the specified banks. And if a person is receiving pension and depositing into a State Bank of India account and getting interest only from State Bank, then he will not have to file a return. But if he also has an account with Bank of India, then he will have to file a return because he's got accounts with 2 banks. It's not that he's completely exempted from giving details. He still has to make a declaration to the specified bank, which means that it's like filing a return because he has to give them full details, expenses of deductions under Section 80C, under Section 80G, etc., etc. It's just that he won't have to file a tax return, but he will have to file a declaration to the bank. So I don't think it saves that much trouble, but it might help a few people. But one has to be careful to see that one still gives all the information to the bank and that you do not have any other income for this to apply. Now, this applies to non-residents who have come back. If they have a retirement fund, like many non-residents who have come back continue to have in the US, then there's a different tax system over there and a different tax system here. So now they say that for this purpose, we will follow the overseas system and we will not charge you tax on the Indian basis, even though you've come back from overseas and you're a resident now. TDS is deducted on dividend, and sometimes the dividend goes to a business trust, like a REIT, a real estate investment trust, or InvIT, an infrastructure investment trust. Now they say that the TDS on dividend will not apply if the dividend is paid to a business trust. And this has retrospective effect from 1st April 2020. I don't know how this will work because prospectively, when it's dividend, the company paying the dividend will not do TDS on such a business trust. In retrospect, how can that happen? Because they would have already paid the dividend, they would have already deducted the TDS, and this provision for some strange reason is brought in with retrospective effect. There is presently an authority for advance rulings. So if a person has an international transaction, a transaction with a non-resident, and he's not clear about his liability, then he can apply to the authority for advance rulings. Although the Income Tax Act says that such decisions have to be given within 6 months, in fact, it takes much longer. The reason is that a High Court judge, a retired High Court judge or a retired Supreme Court judge is supposed to be on this authority. But it appears that they are finding difficulty in finding such person. So now they're not going to have the authority for advance rulings. It will be called the Board of Advance Rulings. And each board shall consist of 2 members. It will not depend on a retired High Court judge. And another difference is that such advance rulings shall not be binding on the applicant or the department, and appeals may be filed to the High Court. So if it's not binding, then it doesn't really serve much purpose because litigation can still go on. There will be, however, two stages of litigation which can be avoided, that after the board for advance rulings, the matter will go straight to the High Court instead of going to the ITO, CIT appeals, tribunal, and then the High Court. So it may cut down some time, but we'll have to see how this actually works. Sometimes an assessee claims depreciation on goodwill, and this has even been allowed by the Supreme Court in the case of Smith Securities Limited. Now, the law will be that there will be no depreciation allowed on goodwill under Section 32 of the Income Tax Act. Section 143, which is part of the procedures of income tax, is now being amended. At present, the ITO can accept your return more or less and give an intimation that he is accepting it. And right now, he's only allowed to make minor changes. Arithmetical errors can be corrected, etc. But now they will say further adjustments can be made. So if you find a return in which you show that your profit was, say, 15 lakhs of rupees, but if your tax audit report shows that certain amounts should have been disallowed, for instance, and that your taxable income was not 15 lakhs but 17 lakhs of rupees, then the ITO can make that adjustment even without calling you for a hearing because it is justified by the audit report. So now the scope of an intimation will be a little bit higher. For provident funds, there is going to be some change, as was mentioned by Sunil ji. Now, exemption for interest will be available only if the contribution is up to 2,50,000 in the case of an EPF. In the case of PPF, Public Provident Fund, they will accept only 1,50,000 per year. But in an EPF, Employees Provident Fund, sometimes the contribution is much more. They get a deduction but the interest in that fund is tax-free. Now the tax-free situation will be reduced and it will be only with reference to contributions of up to 2,50,000. Sometimes a business sells an entire undertaking as a going concern. In some cases, it appears that an assessee sold a going concern and took another going concern in exchange. Once they did an exchange, then the assessees contended that there was no tax liability at all. Because after all, they say, we didn't get any money. I sold an undertaking A, I sold a factory, for instance, together with its running business, and I bought another factory from the other person. Since it was an exchange and there was no money, they contended that there was no tax liability. However, this is now being amended to provide that the definition of transfer under Section 2, subsection 47 includes an exchange and that this will also apply to slumps. There are some minor amendments to declarations which had been made under the income declaration scheme and some minor amendments to the definition of non-resident. There has also been a provision in the last few years that if an assessee carrying on a profession has turnover of up to 50 lakhs of rupees, then they would get a substantive deduction under Section 44 ADA, and they might have to pay tax only with reference to 50% of their income. This would apply to architects, engineers, chartered accountants, lawyers, etc. But now they say that this will not apply to an LLP. This will only apply to an individual, an HUF, and a partnership firm, and not to an LLP. These are some of the provisions. You can see that they are not very significant. We wish that some things had been done. We are glad that some things have not been done, that there's been no COVID tax. But I think one thing that would have helped real estate a great deal is that the GST on flats under construction should have been removed. The GST is substantial. It's 5%. The Maharashtra government has very wisely and reduced the stamp duty from 5% to 2% up to 31st December and to 3% up to 31st March. The central government did not do so. They made many proclamations. They had many speeches on television, etc., saying that they were going to give such a big package, but they didn't really do anything for real estate. In fact, the real estate sector suffered more than most other sectors. It was dependent on workers who came from different parts of the country. They left, they suffered, builders suffered, but there's been no benefit at all. So we wish that GST had been removed. And one other thing was that the income tax rate for individuals were increased to 42.74% about 2 years ago. This ought to have been reduced back down to 35%, but this has not been done. So some of the things that have not been done are good, but some of the things that have not been done are not so good. However, this is the way we've always seen the budget. It's always a mixed bag, and we have to take it as it comes. Thank you.